Hey, good morning, church. Hope you guys are having a great morning so far. So as you know, we're starting through the book of Ezekiel, and we're into Ezekiel 31. So let's just go ahead and dive right in. Verse 1 says, "In the 11th year, in the 3rd month, on the 1st day of the month, the word of the Lord came to me." So here we see Ezekiel getting prophecy from God again. And so verse 2 says, "Son of man, say to Pharaoh, king of Egypt, and to his hordes, who are you like in your greatness? Think of Assyria, a cedar in Lebanon, with beautiful branches and shady foliage and of lofty height. Its top was among the clouds." So here we see that God is talking to Ezekiel about Egypt and Assyria. So we see that these, obviously from history that we know, that these two nations were big, powerful, amazing nations, right? And so here we see it compared to a cedar in Lebanon. So Assyria is like a cedar, right? And it's a big cedar, right? Its top was among the clouds. And we see, as we continue on, verses 4 through 9 is this really big comparison between Assyria and this giant cedar. You know, we see in verse 5, it says, "Therefore the cedar became greater in height than all the trees of the field. Its branches multiplied, and its boughs grew larger as it spread them out because of the plentiful water." So we see that how awesome and amazing this tree was. And then we get into verse 9, it says, "I made it beautiful with its many limbs, and all the trees of Eden, which were in God's garden, envied it." So we see that this nation, this tree was so big and so amazing that it even rivaled the ones in the Garden of Eden that God created for that perfect garden. And so we see that, these nations, these kingdoms are huge and powerful, right? Well, then we get into verse 10. So then we have another section here about 10 through 14 is that, so if we start off reading these section is about that this kingdom was going to be taken down. So verse 10 says, "Therefore, this is what the Lord God says. Since it became great in height and set its top among the clouds, and it grew proud on account of its height, I determined to hand it over to a ruler of nations. He would surely deal with it. I banish it because of its wickedness." So we see that God hands it over to men, and it becomes, he starts to destroy it because they start to be very proudful, very boastful about what they have and what they have done, right? So, and then this section we see that it's starting to be destroyed, right? So verse 13 says, "All the birds of the sky nested on its fallen trunk, and all the animals of the field were among its boughs. This happened so that no trees planted beside water would become great in height and set their tops among the clouds." So we see that this nation was destroyed, right? And so this next section we see, verse 15 through 17, is what happened because that it was destroyed, right? So verse 15 says, "This is what the Lord God says. I caused grieving on the day the cedar went down to Sheol. I closed off the underground deep because of it. I held back the rivers of the deep, and its abundant waters were restrained. I made Lebanon mourn on account of it, and all the trees of the field fainted because of it. I made the nations quake at the sound of its downfall when I threw it down to Sheol to be with those who descended to the pit." So we see that, God destroyed Assyria. He's going to destroy Assyria. So this cedar has been destroyed. So this nation is going to be destroyed. And the reason, it says the reason for it in the other section, but this is what's going to happen. Everyone's going to be sad, and everyone's going to be grieving because of, this big nation's going. And then verse 18 says, "Who then are you like in glory and greatness among Eden's trees?" So that question right there begs the question of, who are you to challenge God? So this group, Egypt and Assyria, they got so big and so powerful that they began to think they would rival God. So they began to challenge God. And then verse 18 says, "Who then are you like in glory and greatness among Eden's trees?" So God, in that scenario, in that comparison, God's asking Egypt and Assyria, who are you to rival me? And a lot of times we get into that same position that, who are we to say that we know more than God, or that our plans are better than God? Let's follow my plans versus. So, we see that when we get into that scenario, God is going to punish us. God's going to show that even if we are great and powerful, that we're really successful, we're really popular, whatever is going on, God's going to take us and he's going to tear us down just like he did here in Egypt and Assyria. So, I hope you guys have a great rest of your day. God bless.